Are you ready to find out why your virtual assistant might just fail or might be failing? In this video, I'm going to dive through the top main ways or reasons that a virtual assistant might just not be working out within your business. The first reason is they're not your person. And what I mean by this is the main thing that differentiates a virtual assistant that you just hire for some task in your business versus your virtual assistant is because your virtual assistant is someone who becomes that second brain, becomes your person in the business versus if you just hire someone who's just taking care of your social media, who's just taking care of your bookkeeping, who's just taking care of one part of your business. And a lot of the time we can confuse the two. So sometimes we expect the bookkeeper, social media assistant to be your person, or the other way around where we expect our person, our own virtual assistant to be the social media, to be the bookkeeper assistant. Now, there has to be a distinction between which one you hired in the first place before you hired for this person. There has to be that basically intention of like, this is the kind of person that I'm hiring, this is the help that I need within my business. And honestly, that's one of the ways that for us at 2XU, when we're hiring an assistant for our clients, we're really looking for their person who's their executive assistant versus a virtual assistant for their social media, bookkeeping, whatever else that they need, where they're focused on a specific role instead of the role being that they're your assistant. So it has to start with you, where you have the clarity of who is this person going to be really in my business 6 months to a year later, rather than just hiring just because you have this problem. You're being very intentional about the kind of person that you're hiring, whether again, they're your person kind of assistant, or they are someone who's just focused on this part of their business and they don't really have to necessarily be your direct like executive assistant. They're a virtual assistant for this kind of role. And of course, if you want to find out more, feel free to book a 2XU assessment below and we'll figure out which type you kind of really need. Now, the second reason is you're delegating tasks and not outcomes. When it comes to working with virtual assistants, especially if they're your virtual assistant, is they need to be trained on thinking outcomes and not tasks. So what I mean by this is when you're giving them a task, you use the WOW framework. You're basically going to give them the why of this task, why this matters, the outcome that you're looking for, and then the who and the what, which is basically who is involved in this outcome and what are the resources that they will have. So instead of saying write 3 to 5 social media posts on LinkedIn, you say, I want to increase the engagement on LinkedIn by 10%. Make sure that the posts that you're writing reflect that. So they're focused on the outcome that you want rather than the one-by-one task that you're giving them. You're giving the full context of what they're working towards to give them the best chance of succeeding. Next reason is you're not giving feedback. And this is a key thing when you're working with someone remotely and working with someone very new as well. Let's say even if they've had like 5 years experience with another job, but this is their first time working with you, there are going to be things that they will assume about you because of their past job, that if you're not the one to give them feedback, it just won't work out. So giving them feedback, whether they did a really good job or if they just need a little bit of a redirect to kind of position them better for the next time that they do a task, is going to be one of the key ways to set them up for success. However, a key thing that I will always point out is if you've already given the feedback and they don't seem that they're not getting any better, then that might be one of the ways to look at of like, oh, that's just something that's an issue, the potential red flag is something I want to work with them on. And of course, later on, if it just isn't really working out, then it might be really time to have that person exit your business. But if you have not put in the time to actually give them the feedback on how they can do better next time, then it's going to be up to you as the boss, as the employer, to point it out. Next is your coddling / abdicating. So a lot of the times I will see this dynamic a lot where a client will either coddle their assistant or they're micromanaging and watching every single thing that they're doing, making sure that they're giving them that ROI. Or on the flip side, they're abdicating. They're delegating by abdicating. They're just giving and throwing things at their assistant, hoping that they'll figure it out. Now, these two extremes do exist, and you want to find what makes sense for you as a good middle ground. And for a lot of the time, that middle ground changes depending on what the outcome or the project is. So for example, let's say you hired someone who has social media management experience, and you want to have them handle your LinkedIn or your Instagram. You might be on more of the making sure that they just have the outcome that they need and just letting them figure it out. But if that same social media assistant or the person you hired had social media tasks and you want them to start going at your bookkeeping or data entry or data management, then you might be on the side where you're watching what they're doing until you're confident that they can just actually just run with it, and then you go back to the middle. So there are times and instances like that where you do have to change your management style, but you have to be aware of it, of choosing what management style basically applies to this versus just letting, either ends of the spectrum where you're either calling them or you're just delegating by abdicating. You have to have that awareness to know which one works for different situations when it comes to working with your assistant. Speaking of, another common reason I see a lot of virtual assistants failing is you're not setting guidelines. And guidelines could mean processes and systems. So having your assistant or you have created like a standard government procedure, you have assets, you have templates that makes it easy for them to just follow and get things done. It could also be guidelines on communicating, like how often you want to be communicated, or even guidelines on how they're going to be using AI. Is what is acceptable for you to their extent of use of AI, or is it that you don't want them to use AI at all, or you want them to use AI up to this certain point? So it's up to you to set what those guidelines are and what is acceptable and what's not, which is why the feedback is so important here, as well as being able to build systems with them so that it's easy for them to create the same results over and over again. They're not just having to guess what they're supposed to be doing next on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. There's a system that they can follow that they've either built for themselves and you've approved it, or that you built with them, whatever that looks like. The main key thing here is you've set up what that looks like or what you expect, basically having more explicitly given what you expect with the relationship and making sure that you follow through and give feedback when they are not aligned to that. Lastly, the reason why your assistant might be failing or might have failed is they're just the wrong hire. And it happens. It's a very common thing, more common than you think. Doesn't mean that you failed, it doesn't mean that they failed, it just wasn't a match. It could have been a skill mismatch where they just weren't able to match up to the skill that they promised. It could have been just a character mismatch or values mismatch where you believed one certain thing and they believed the other, so that caused a rift. Or it could have been a systems mismatch where you weren't able to set up the right systems or they weren't able to follow the systems, and it just became this repeating pattern, which goes back a little bit to values anyway. So it goes back to you making sure that you have the clarity on the kind of person that you want to hire, not just what they're going to be worked on, but who they are as a person is going to be one of the key ways to make sure that you work with your assistant in a very clear and intentional way as well. And again, if you guys want to get started as well on hiring your very first virtual assistant, make sure to book a call below. And if you guys like this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button right there. Comment below any questions you might have, or maybe even bottlenecks that you've had when it comes to hiring or working with a virtual assistant. I would love to know. And if you still haven't yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button right there so you don't miss any of my videos every Thursday on how to build your business, especially with virtual assistant and AI. And if you want your assistant to learn a little bit more, check out my second channel here, and of course, the latest video right here. I hope you guys have an amazing and fantastic day, and with that, small steps matters. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.